Okay, well, first just want to say welcome to everyone, and we're excited that you're here today to learn more about our new grant process. For those of you who have done this before, you know that when we came through COVID, we had a lot of help from Doug Wickham, and we're hoping that this new process will actually go even smoother than that did. I should probably introduce myself. I didn't do that in the last session. I'm Connie Froggett, and I am the grant chair for the Montgomery County Educational Foundation. And I'll let my co-hosts introduce themselves when they get to their parts. But anyway, as I said, we're glad to have you here. We are starting this new process. And so, Jessica, if you want to go ahead and kick off with the slides. So as you know, our cycle is already open. It opened back on May 31st, and it will continue until July 21st at 5 p.m., at which time the Community Foundation staff will shut that down. So you will want to have your applications completed by then. Go ahead. One of the questions we always get, of course, is who can apply? And obviously teachers, and the majority of our applicants are teachers, but we have also received applications from administrators, both at the school level as well as at central office. We do accept applications from our PTAs and PTOs as well, and we have granted several grants to them in the past. We have actually had 2 students apply. And in that case, whenever you have a student, of course, we will need an adult to help sponsor them, but students are welcome to apply. We do allow support organizations that work with or for Montgomery County Public Schools to apply. This would be things like Head Start, community services, community action, things like that. And we do allow our support personnel, not just educators, but it takes a whole community to support our students. And so we do open this up to support personnel, and we have in the past received grants or applications and given grants to aides, SROs, school nurses, and other support personnel as well. Just to give you an idea of what we're looking for in a project, we base this on our core mission, and I won't read this whole thing to you, but if you notice the part highlighted in red, our main goal is to discover and advance and enhance educational opportunities for our students. And as it says here, an investment in our schools is an investment in this community, and that's why we're here. And that's why we do this grant process, because we want to create new experiences and opportunities for our students. Our vision, you will notice in the highlighted areas, meshes well with the MCPS logo to engage, empower, and encourage. We engage the community, meaning we reach out to donors so that they can support public schools, empowering our educators and everyone involved with MCPS to provide these exceptional experiences. And we want to, in particular, encourage innovation and creativity in these projects for our students. Okay, so what we fund, this is always another question we get a lot, and this is mainly defined by 2 of our 4 goals. One of them, to provide opportunities beyond the scope of available public resources, meaning we fund things that would pretty much never be funded with public funds, or things that may not currently be, that we can prototype or do test runs on, things that then may get picked up later by MCPS. 2 examples of that is we supplied some of the first iPads that teachers had in their classrooms. And of course, eventually, teachers were supplied with iPads. Another project we helped prototype the little MiFi hotspots that became really popular during COVID and were used by a lot of students during that time. So we actually helped pioneer that. And to provide resources for creative and innovative programs and materials. So that kind of falls into exactly what I've just said, is we don't want to duplicate things that are already being done. We also don't want to we don't fund things that may have been lost due to budget cuts. We recognize that things like budget cuts have a large impact, but that's not why we're here. We want to make sure that students still receive those exceptional experiences that go beyond what the normal curriculum and funding can provide. I do like to talk a little bit about what we don't fund, just to give folks an idea up front, some of the things that we just don't fall within our scope. One big change this year, if you've applied before, is that we are not funding professional development through our grant process. We will be doing that through a separate process now. Teachers will be able to apply on a rolling basis as the need arises, and we will analyze each on a case-by-case basis, and that will be done directly by the Educational Foundation. This process is strictly for grants and is going through the Community Foundation. Another thing that we've been frequently asked to fund that we do not fund is food and snacks. Again, that doesn't really fit into the idea of unique or creative or innovative. And we realize that there are programs, particularly like after-school programs, where you want to be able to provide those things. But in the applications we've received for those, we've been more than willing to fund materials for the program, but we do not fund food or snacks. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about your projects. You really want something that's going to be creative and innovative.
Thanks, Connie. Jonathan, do you want to introduce yourself and share a little bit about the support that you can provide to applicants?
Sure. So I know Leslie and Carrie, and Leslie, we've worked together on a grant application before, but essentially for MCEF, it's the same practice, whatever help that you need, from the idea of fleshing out your project, shaping your idea, to the details on the project, to making sure I remind you to check with your principal and have approval for the grant. But basically, anything that you need help with, you let me know, and we can also work with it through. We often work. I will often meet virtually with someone who wants help with a grant application, and then we'll collaborate electronically from there to finish the application. But whatever you need, just holler.
And one thing I did remind folks of, or let folks know in the last session, Jonathan is on the MCEF board, but he does not vote on the grants. He does recuse himself from those. So whether you use his services or not will not help or hinder your application. So we do always put that little caveat out there so everyone knows, for transparency, that yes, he is on our board, but he is not. He does recuse himself from the vote on the grants.
Yeah, but your application will be better, so it won't help.
Well, we all know that.
Great. Thank you all. So Leslie and Carrie, my name's Jessica. I'm with the Community Foundation of the New River Valley, and I am going to kind of walk you through the application system that we use, since Montgomery County Educational Foundation's application will now run through our online system. So just show you some of the resources we have. We'll walk through how to set up an account within our system, which you'll just have to do once, and then how you apply for the grant after that. And once you've got a profile in our system, then in future years for MCEF, you will be able to just continuously log in, see past grant applications, and apply without going through that initial process. So let me share my screen and just show some of the resources that we have available to start. Can you all see that okay? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the first thing that I wanted to show everyone is just to direct you to the Community Foundation's website, which is cfnrv.org. And underneath this grants tab at the top, you will see the Montgomery County Educational Foundation's grant program. And this is kind of your main spot to come to for information about the program and resources that are available, and all the links and contact information that you'll need. So Connie already shared with us who is eligible. The grants MCEF makes will be up to $1,000. And when we talk later about the budget, your project can be more than $1,000, but this grant cannot fund more than $1,000. There's some good guidance here on what we're looking for. And then I did want to note that as in past years, there will be a final report required should you be funded. Information about what should be in that report is linked here under MCEF grant program terms and conditions. So please read through that because you will need, when you first complete the application, to confirm that you did read those terms and conditions and are prepared to fulfill those with whatever project you put forward. We've got contact information, including for Jonathan, when you have questions about your project. Our phone number and email here at the Community Foundation if you have questions about the online system, and then also MCEF's main contact information as well. And then I also just wanted to note the dates. As Connie said, the application is open now and the deadline is July 21st at 5 p.m., at which time the application closes out. So you'll need to make sure you submit the application before that deadline in order for it to be considered. And then I'll review kind of our process in a little bit for how we read and score applications. But that process takes a little bit of time. And so the check will actually be issued to you in the September to October timeframe as we make selections. So just be aware of that as you're planning for your project, that you'll actually get that check, that money kind of in the middle part of the fall semester. And then finally, at the bottom of the page are resources that you'll need. So again, that terms and conditions. This online grants portal technical support guide will walk you through how to set up your profile in our online system. And there's some specific information in there for MCEF, which I'll show you, but it's also important to just know that this is here. It is going to walk you step by step through how to do it. And this will help you as you get started, get used to the system. You can also take a look before you go into the system at the application questions and then the scoring rubric that the reviewers will use, just so you know how we're going to be looking at these. So this is kind of the main area that you will go to in order to learn about it and then be able to access the online grant portal, which is linked here. So once you do that, you're going to come and you will see a page that looks like this to log into the grant portal. So the first thing you'll need to do is create a new account. And as I said, that technical support guide that's linked on the website walks you through everything you'll need to do this. But I wanted to show you just a few things in here as well. So when you are doing this, if you are a teacher or a support organization or a PTA, PTO, you can put all this information in here. Student groups, when you are completing this, kind of the head of the student group plus the teacher who's supporting or sponsoring you should be the one that is completing this. So just quickly, I'm going to put in some information so you can see how this goes. Because this system is also what we use for the grants we give to nonprofit organizations, it requires this tax ID number. So if you are part of MCPS and any of the schools in that, it is in the technical support guide, and you will also use the number that I am putting in right here in case you don't know that. This is the one for MCPS. If you are a PTA or PTO, you should have your own tax ID number. And then support organizations like New River Community Action or Community Services all have their own numbers as well. And you'll just kind of fill in the basic contact information here and kind of note what is required. Pardon me, I'm going to fill this in so it lets me move to the next section. Then you'll enter your general contact information in here. And as you go through this, just a couple of things to note. The email that you use is the email that we are going to send all correspondence to through the online system. So when you submit your application, you'll get an automated email. When we send reminders to complete your final report, they will all come through the system. So please make sure that you are using an email that you're checking regularly, so that we know that it is getting to you. So I'll just put this in here so it lets me move forward. Sorry. Make sure I put everything. Okay. And then the other section that I wanted to point out as you're setting it up is this executive officer question. And again, in that technical support guide, it is going to give you instructions on how to complete this. But what it's really asking is, are you the main person who is managing this project? Or is there an executive officer that's going to manage it? So if you are, for most of you, what you're going to do is select no. And that will allow you to continue to move through here without adding additional people to your profile. If you're a student group, you will select yes, so that we make sure we have both the students' information, but then also the teacher that is working with them on the application. And again, that is in that support guide. And then it'll continue to walk you through. If you do need to add an additional person, it like a teacher for a student group, it will in the additional executive officer section ask for that. And then you will set up a password, and you will get, once you set up your account, a confirmation email once it's been set up. So it's a pretty straightforward process. If you have any questions or difficulty as you're going into the system, you can always call the Community Foundation's office and again, take a look at that technical support guide too. So once you have set up your profile, and you could, as I said, only have to do that once, and then you are good to go going forward. And you will log in, and you will go to apply up in the left-hand corner, and you are going to see all of the open grant applications at the Community Foundation. So the one that we're focused on here is the Montgomery County Educational Foundation's grant application, and it gives you an overview of that, like we talked about already. And then you'll hit apply. And you'll see, I just logged in as someone else just so you could see the system from a user's perspective, but you'll see that your contact information and all that is going to attach automatically to your application. So you don't have to worry about re-entering that. You will focus instead on just going through the application. So I'll walk through the basics, and then Connie can kind of walk through it as well with some additional comments on what MCEF looks for. So I mentioned before, the terms and conditions are key. Please take a look at those so you know what we're asking for in the final report. And it also includes things like if you have photos, what kind of format they should be in, that you'll need a parental release form to use student photos, those kinds of things. All of that's included in the terms and conditions. So you'll select yes. And then you will indicate whether you've been a previous applicant and whether you've been awarded funding before. And again, you should have completed, if you were funded before, one of those final reports, because that's going to be tracked year to year, just as it has been in the past. You'll include your project name, the amount requested, which can be up to $1,000. And then you'll indicate your home, school, or program. And this is a drop-down menu. So you're just going to select the main one that's appropriate to you, or you can put other and make sure you include, like if you're a PTA or a PTO, your affiliation when you are in the project summary. You'll also want to make sure you put other schools that benefit. So if the project goes across different schools or as a collaboration between programs, make sure that you are putting that in this section. Then,
Just back up.
Yep.
I think
Sorry,
you
skipped
skipped
one.
printable.
Yep. Sorry about that. I skipped that section. Sorry about that, Connie. Home location and program. Sorry, I skipped over Please make sure that you include the name of your principal or the director of the program and their email address so that we know that this is a program that your principal or director has signed off on and is supportive of. So include that here. And then again, the other schools that benefit. And then again, if you feel like you're going to need technology needs of any kind, you'll want to make sure that you put the ITRT name and email address as well. So we have that contact information. Then project start and end date. And then the next several questions will be the narrative about your project. And for each one of these, you'll see that there is a character limit as opposed to a word limit. So this is a character limit where spaces are considered characters. So just be mindful of how much space you have. This should be plenty for you. And the system will alert you if you're going over your character limit. So the first is just a summary of your project, and note that it can be used for publication. So make sure that it's something that is concise and that we could put out, for example, as we're promoting your projects. You'll then write the goals and objectives of your project and how they relate to the SOLs or maybe to other standards that you might be utilizing within your project. You'll write about the need and the originality of the project. And this is really where we get to the core purpose of MCEF and what it seeks to fund beyond the traditional public school funded items. So this is where you really want to put what's innovative, either the project itself, or if there's a component of an existing project you're adding, what's innovative about that. Then you'll write about the impact and the benefits to students and colleagues now and in the future. And you'll also talk about the alignment to the mission of MCEF and MCPS. You'll be asked to talk about sustainability of your project, and Connie will say a little bit about that as well and provide some examples for you in a minute, but just whether or not this is kind of a one-time thing, or maybe you're buying a piece of equipment that will support students beyond just those who use it in that calendar year. So you'll write there. Those are all, again, narrative sections that you will just be writing directly into the system. And then the last two questions are where you'll upload a file. The first is the budget, and we ask you to be clear and detailed about this. So what is the budget for your project overall? Not just what you're requesting from MCEF, but if your project is more than the $1,000, make sure you've got your full project budget. And then what are you specifically requesting from MCEF to fund? If you've got other funding sources that are supporting that, make sure that's clear in there. And then you'll see that it allows you to also say, could your project be partially funded or funded in stages? Because sometimes both MCEF and when the foundation does its own grant making, we won't have enough money but want to fund something in part. But we don't want partial funding to be an impediment to the project. So we want to know, could it be partially funded in order to be successful? You will click on here to upload a file, and it will allow you to kind of search within your files. I believe it asks for a PDF. Make sure that you have looked at the PDF, as in, if you save a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet to PDF, you want to make sure that it formatted okay so that we can read it. Sometimes folks will upload a document where they think it looks okay, and then when we try to open it on our end, it's tiny, we can't read it. So please make sure that you're kind of testing it and making sure after it's uploaded, click on the link for that file to make sure you can read it. And then the final one is additional considerations. So maybe it's as it says here, price comparisons, quotes you've got from things, something that you might feel the committee should know as they're considering your application. As you go through this at any time, you can scroll to the bottom and hit save application, and it's going to save the work that you've done. You can log out and come back to it. But when you complete the application in full, you'll hit submit application. And after that, you will not be able to make any changes. So just make sure that you've saved and that you've looked through it several times before you hit submit. Let me turn it over to Connie if you want. I'll kind of go back to the top and you can just add in some other pointers.
Thank you, Jessica. So let's see, let's start. Okay, we'll start immediately again. We can't stress enough how important it is to read the terms and conditions. If you've applied for one before, you would recognize the wording in there because it's what used to be our grant acceptance form. But we decided this time to just put it right up front, let people know this is what's going to be required of you should you receive these funds. So before you even apply, we want you to be aware of what the requirements will be for that final report. So that's why we're putting it right up front. And then again, you'd be surprised, there are people who aren't aware whether they've applied for a grant before or not, or they'll think they have it and they haven't turned in their report. And that is the main reason that reports get kicked back or that applications get kicked back, is because we find out someone did have a grant before, they have not turned in their final report, and that does make them ineligible to apply until they have turned it in. The one exception to that would be anyone awarded last year. Their deadline has not hit yet, which is at the end, the calendar year. So they are fine, but anyone awarded one prior to this past fall should have their final report in by now. All right, as Jessica mentioned, we will grant up to $1,000, but the project can exceed that, but we can only fund $1,000 of it. She mentioned the importance of listing your principal or whoever and making sure they are aware that you are applying for this. One thing that I think we failed to mention in the previous session that occurred to me, Jonathan, is that all grants are sent to the school board for approval as well. Jonathan will take those to the school board in mid-August for their approval as one large group. So that part of the process, if you've ever done a grant somewhere else and you're like, I have to submit this and it has to go to the school board, Jonathan will be taking care of that for you. Be sure if you are working with other schools or there are other schools that will benefit from this, that you list them. That is obviously going to improve the scoring of your grant, because you're going to have a larger impact if it's going across schools or to some outside organization. And again, make sure, and this is a case where if you're not sure, say yes and put your ITRT's name and an email address in there. If if we look at it, we go, no, this is not an issue, we just, that's fine. But if we don't have it, then we have to come back to you and say, hey, this is technology that is going to impact your ITRT. You should have included them. And if you're submitting right up at the deadline, we may not be able to do that. So it could cause your application to get kicked out. So if you're using anything that involves technology, list them on there. Let's see. Again, as Jessica mentioned, we sometimes use these for publication. One of the main thing we often use these for is we continue, of course, to seek donors throughout this process. And we haven't stopped just because the application, cycle has started. We're still doing that. And oftentimes, especially if we get an early application that looks really good, as we're talking to donors and sponsors, because we do solicit grant sponsors, we can say, hey, we have this wonderful application, show them that summary. And oftentimes we have a good idea what certain donors are looking for and what types of grants they might be willing to support. So having that nice, concise summaries is good for us for PR purposes, and also for just simply bringing in donations and possible sponsor for your grant. Okay, the standards. Absolutely make sure whatever you're submitting, you can tie it to some form of standard. Normally it is the SOLs, but we have received applications where they tied it to some other national standard or something within their area of expertise that tied to education, but may not have been specifically the SOLs. But make sure you are tying to some form of applicable standard there. For need and originality, which are two different things, need, of course, is why do your students need this? In other words, it's not being provided by the school system for some reason, but yet you feel like you're addressing a need with this project. What is that need? And that does somewhat tie into originality in that it may be something that's never been done before, but you've identified that this is something students need. And so therefore it is unique, it's innovative, that kind of thing. But we're always looking for things that are not, the standard curriculum, but are much more engaging. And again, are going to provide those unique experiences or fulfill a need that is not being fulfilled. Again, for impact and benefits, we mentioned, if your project is going to reach a lot of students, even if it's going to reach students down the road, that's great. Make sure we know that, say, hey, so this year I have 30 students in my classroom that'll use this, but, I teach I've been teaching this subject for 5 years and expect to be continuing to, and so there'll be students for 3 more years that'll be able to use this. So that's a bigger impact. You're showing a lot more benefit with your project. The mission alignment, again, just goes back to that engage, encourage, and empower from MCPS, and how your project fits in with this sort of combined mission. So sustainability is the one that the people have in the past have had the most difficulty understanding what we're looking for. There are different kinds of sustainability, and obviously the more sustainable something is, the higher it's going to score. An easy example is when you buy something like an iPad, for example, that's going to last for 3 to 5 years and be used by many students. That's a no-brainer. At the other end of the spectrum, it might be an art project where all of the supplies are going to be consumed in 1 year. That's not going to have a lot of sustainability. And then sort of in between, you can have 2 possible scenarios. One where you have a project where parts of it are sustainable, but you might have some consumables that would have to be replaced in future years. And oftentimes when something new is being introduced, that'll be the case. And one way you can show sustainability is to say, okay, we're piloting this year. We're asking you to fund this year. But if this is successful, then our school will continue to fund those few items that were consumed this year and are needed for following years. So then that shows that you've addressed the sustainability. The other one that is not nearly as tangible, but can be equally important, is when you have an event or a one-time experience that is essentially an experience of a lifetime for a student. And the example I used before is, say you're taking a group of students to an actual Broadway show. That is something that many kids will never, ever get to experience. And so it takes a stronger narrative to kind of explain that type of benefit, but still it is a form of sustainability. It is a life experience for that student that they may carry, for years down the road. So think about that when you think about sustainability as well. As Jessica mentioned, be sure you include your entire project budget. It is totally fine if it is, a big project and we're only funding a piece of it. Just as long as you explain to us what part we are funding and that you can show that the entire project will be funded. In other words, we don't fund things where you're asking us for money and then you say, and then we're going to go out and see if we can get this and this and this. You need to come to us and say, we already have commitments from here and from here and from here, and we would like for you to fund this piece, and this is what we would use it for. But obviously, if your project is the $1,000 or less, then include exactly what it is we would be funding for your project. And obviously, additional considerations, anything you want to add that can help the committee to assess your project and support your arguments and the things you've entered in your narratives, then absolutely do that.
Great, thanks, Connie. So let's pause for a second. Are there any questions about the application? Okay. So a couple more things before we talk about the review process. As I said, once you have completed everything and you feel good about it, you will hit submit application. And you will receive an email that says that your application has been submitted. But you can always contact the Community Foundation office if you just want that extra level of assurance that it is in, and we're happy to go in and check and make sure it was submitted. We also strongly encourage you to not wait until the last minute to put your application in. Hopefully you have plenty of time before July 21st. But often if you put it in a few days beforehand, the Community Foundation staff is consistently looking in the system and looking at each one of the applications that's submitted. And so if we find that, a file isn't opening properly, or you've missed something that is required, we can alert you and say, hey, you need to go back in and upload this. And we can put your application back into a draft status, as it's called, so you can go ahead and add that stuff and then submit it again. So just make sure that you're taking the time to do that ahead of time. This application process runs at the same time as our larger responsive grant process. So many things are happening at the last minute on the 21st. We just won't be able to troubleshoot anything if you're waiting until the last minute. Kind of on that note, I also wanted to go back to this main page where you'll see the open grant opportunities. And the main one you want to focus on is MCEF, but I did just want to say for a moment that at the same time, the foundation's general operating support grant application is open. This is what we use to fund nonprofits across the region. For the most part, if you are writing an application that's for a project within a school, you will focus only on the MCEF application. But sometimes we have certainly groups like Head Start, for example, or other organizations that might actually be kind of eligible for both. And so in that case, these applications can be quite different. So fill out the MCEF one for specifically what you're asking for MCEF. And then the general operating support grant is just more broadly beyond your specific project. It might be, Head Start needs operational support and they'll apply to us. If for some reason you're not sure and think, well, hey, maybe something else I'm doing, or maybe my project would fit, again, call the foundation's office. You can talk to us about it and we can tell you whether it's worth looking at that opportunity as well. So let me pause again. Any other questions about either the online system or any of the information Connie and I provided about what's required?
One thing I did note last time, Jessica, is just to remind folks, yes, we are accepting applications from students, but please note that these should not be scholarship type applications. These are project-based. The Community Foundation does have a wonderful scholarship program for students, and we certainly would invite our students to apply to those as appropriate, but this is not intended to be any form of scholarship for a student. It's intended to be a project-based application. And we did receive the question of if it's like a student group, then when you're entering those names, one student should represent the group, and then there should be at least one adult teacher, whatever sponsor, as well in that executive officer position, who will be guaranteeing the grant that the project is completed and the final report is filed. And I think one other question we had received last time was, if you happen to not have a principal right now, who do you put for your director? And next would certainly be an assistant principal. And if for some reason you don't have either at your school right now, then I would say reach out to your director of secondary or elementary for that position.
So I'll stop sharing as we kind of talk through the last piece, which is what happens after you submit your application. So this will follow the Community Foundation's review process. So what that means is that once you submit your application on the 21st, the first thing that we do at the foundation is our staff looks through all the applications, make sure that they are complete, and that whomever has applied is indeed eligible for that particular grant. So for example, we actually had somebody call in today from Narrows High School wondering if they could apply for the MCEF grant. And we said, unfortunately, no, that is not within Montgomery County. If they had submitted, that's when we would have flagged to pull out in advance. So that's the first step. Then the next thing that we do is the Community Foundation has a committee that reviews applications for us. Outside of MCEF, we typically get about 100 to 120 grant applications in a cycle. So our committee splits into small teams based on a particular issue area like education or the arts, and they read and score online applications in that area. In the case of MCEF, we'll have a team that will look at all of those MCEF applications together, and they will again go online, read the applications and score them using the rubric that is linked on the site, and some MCEF board members and grant committee members will be a part of that. Once everything is scored online, the next thing we do is that each one of the teams meets as a group, virtually or in person, to kind of talk through the applications, because each individual's way of scoring might be different despite the fact that we have a similar rubric. So we talk through each application, and then our teams put each application into one of three categories. So if they give it a 1, that means this is a really strong application. We want to make sure this is funded. If they give it a 2, it means this is a good application. If we have money, we would fund it. Or they can give it a 3, which is this is not something that we think should be funded. And that just allows us, once we start moving into the funding phase, to really know what are the ones that we're going to put top priority on. All of that information, what the team scores were and what they're prioritized, will then be shared more broadly with the grants committee, with MCEF, and they will recommend the specific grants to be funded. That does, as always, have to be kind of approved at the foundation level, which is a quick process, and then we cut the checks to you. But as you can tell, as I'm explaining it, it's a multi-step process. So again, you'll put your application in July, but you won't get that check until some point, probably later in September into October, by the time it's gone through our full review process. And that way we'll be able to get that out to you, and we'll alert you as well when that happens. One thing I neglected to mention earlier, but we'll say here, is that we do not go into the system and add like review comments later. But we always, at least for the grants we do to nonprofits, say if you have a question about why something didn't get funded, you can always call and ask us, and we can go back in and look at any comments that our reviewers may have made or provide any advice. And Connie, I don't know if you guys do something similar with who's applied before, but that's an option.
Yeah, we've always allowed them to reach out to us if they, would like to know why it wasn't funded. We've very rarely had that happen, but there have been a couple cases where people asked, what was the reason? And oftentimes it is something like it just simply doesn't fit into the scope of what we normally fund. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, when we were doing this with our grant committee, the scoring rubric that Jessica and her team are going to be using, in fact, everything they've done has come from our process that we've been doing for a decade now. And I really want to thank them for being so thorough in following that and being true to it and getting it all set up on the website for us in time and everything. The scoring rubric, if you've ever seen one of our grants before, is the number system is slightly different, but what you're being scored on is the same. The one thing, if you're familiar with our previous rubric, that you might notice is missing is evaluation. We did remove that. It was an area that everyone seemed to struggle with. And we decided that's because we asked for a final report that we really don't need an explanation of what the evaluation will be. That final report is the evaluation of your project, essentially. So that's one reason that is no longer included, but all the other areas are in there that were in there before. And we essentially went through the same process that Jessica's describing. When we would sit down as a committee, we would break them into 3 groups. We happened to use green, yellow, and red, but it was the exact same idea that everyone in the green was like a 1. Those were the projects we absolutely wanted to fund. And everyone in the yellow, that was like the 2. They were like, yeah, these are good projects, but we might not have enough money to go that far down the list. And then anything in the red were the ones that, I may have gotten those numbers backwards, but were the ones that were said, no, these just really don't fit, what we normally fund. So, and then, as Jessica said, is that process of maybe looking at some of those in that mid-range and seeing, can we partially fund? Which ones are rising to the top, maybe more than the others, and where does the money stop? So we will still be going through, we will be taking the scores that come from the team, the Community Foundation team, and we will present those to our board and give the, how they spell out and say, this is what we can fund. And then it will be up to them. Final decision, of course, is up to the MCF board to approve those recommendations. And then we'll send them to Jessica.
Thanks, Connie. So with that, I think we're just open to any questions that you all may have about the process. Anything that is unclear.
I think you all have answered all the questions I possibly could have thought of. This was really thorough and really helpful, and I feel really encouraged about actually, starting that process. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Carrie.
Yeah. And one thing I'll tell you, if the thought of funding isn't enough incentive, we, in the past, before COVID, each year when we would cut the checks, we would have a ceremony and we would invite everyone to it was like a little, luncheon type thing. And we would feed you, and we would also give you the opportunity to meet the person that actually sponsored your grant. We've been unable to do that, of course, since COVID. So we're a few years behind. So our plan this year is to have a very big party with not only this year's recipients and sponsors, but hopefully a lot of our previous ones that never got to come. In fact, a lot of them, most of the recognition they got, which someone had asked about, do you ever put this on social media? That was actually how we announced all of the recipients during COVID. Was we asked them when they got their check and their certificate, please take a picture of yourself with your principal and send it to us so we can post it on social media and, show off what you've done and be proud of it and know that we're proud of you. But this way we at least get together and celebrate what you've done. And it's a wonderful way to sort of go towards the end of the semester and finish out the semester going into the holidays with, a celebration like this. So that it is our plan to do that this year, to finally get everybody back together and recognize you for those recipients who have made the effort to really go above and beyond for their students.
Okay. Anything else to add or any other questions? Okay.
Thank everyone for being here. We look forward to seeing applications.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Have a wonderful weekend.
You too.